You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
Oh, hey, it's the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Adam Armbrecht, covering the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. He is Douglas Norrie, DFSR, owner-operator for all those daily projections. FanDuel, DraftKings, he's got you covered over there. Hey, Doug, what the heck? Let's talk a little bit more about James Harden today and the concrete thoughts that we all collectively, not just as Nets fans, but as the NBA world overall, agree are facts, and they are immovable.
Well, it just kind of you can't even post a podcast because you got to worry that 3 minutes later you're going to get some piece of conflicting news that's going to call into question the thing you just talked about, and that's just kind of where we are with the Harden thing right now. It's mired in no news, and it feels like any second something could happen, and you get conflicting reports from all over the place. Like there's different stuff is being leaked. I mean, I'll tell you what's true. This part's true. Stuff, all kinds of different stuff is being leaked to just about everybody out there. And that part is 100% true because there are so many conflicting sort of like stories and reports coming out from people that aren't in the hot take business, that are in the reporting business. And when that's the case, those things just don't get, float down from air and you make them up on like a little piece of paper. Like this stuff all has legs from people that they trust, right? That the people that they have sourced to be reliable people and organizations, whether it's the Nets, whether it's the Sixers or wherever, reliable people in these organizations that they can trust and say a piece of reporting that James Harden is they're getting close on a trade, or James Harden is not being traded, and these wildly conflicting reports depending on where you read. And that's just kind of where we are right now, that I just don't even know. I don't know what to believe. And I almost just at this point just going to say, hey, wake me up on Thursday at 1 p.m. And that's what I'm going to do, because following each little, morsel that gets tossed out there is almost totally useless at this point with the Harden thing.
Well, by the way, because we said maybe we're going to come over the weekend, do an emergency podcast. We came in with the wrapping up of everything that had gone on. And as you would expect, some people were in the YouTube comments being like, dude, Kevin Durant said he wants him to be there. Like Steve Nash just said, no, we're not trading him. But it's like, yeah, but that's what he said today. And tomorrow someone will say, heard a rumor and speculation. And I was talking with Kai Carlin from the Locked On Sixers podcast. Keith Pompey is over there as well, working for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And he was talking about what it seems to sum it up to me, and why so many valid reporters are giving you a spectrum of information over 3-4 days, is they were basically saying there's this overhanging cloud of the tampering and can't have direct conversations about things. And that essentially anything that you've heard that has been talked about has gone on in back channels between the Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers to avoid any investigations of tampering expectations. So whether or not you want to take it at face value that James Harden had said going back to January, I want to be here. And then, by the way, that's what Steve Nash was referencing. He was saying, yeah, going back to January. Like, he said he's all in. Like, right, a lot of things have happened since then, Steve Z. And I think what it comes down to is where both sides stand on this, or I wonder, do the Brooklyn Nets stand here and think, well, James Harden doesn't want to be here because he's frustrated and the short-term issues that have happened this season? Or is he saying I'm basically done, regardless of what happens right now? On Philadelphia's side of it, are we surprised that we've had more success this year in spite of not having one of these key pieces in Ben Simmons, and maybe going and getting a piece like James Harden is going to push us over the top and make us a contender in the league? Does Brooklyn not want to give a conference rival with the key piece to go on a championship run? All of these things seem to be swirling around it. And I wish there was a way just to go, oh, you're not going to stay. We're not going to get you on the extension. It's not worth worrying about the sign and trade in the offseason. We should pull the trigger now. And maybe it just comes down to what each side is setting up expectation-wise. As we've heard, 76ers saying, well, we want a lot back for Ben Simmons. And if the Nets look at Harden and go, well, we all know what he is as a talent, there's no world where you're lining these guys up and saying, oh, it's a 1-for-1 if we ever made this deal.
Yeah, dude, this is what I mean about it's a totally impossible situation. And we were talking about it before, but it's one of those crazy situations where it feels like I couldn't remember any other example like this, where it felt like both teams simultaneously had all the leverage and both teams simultaneously had no leverage. Like all in the same situation. Like it's like, because if you look at it one way, you're like, dude, like the Nets are totally in the driver's seat here. They just don't have to do anything. They have Harden. They do not have to sign and trade him to Philly. Like even if they want to do extension, they don't have to do a single thing. They have the best player right now. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the net side. But then the other side of the no leverage part is like, well, if he doesn't want to stay and maybe he's hurt a little worse than you realize, than that is realized, or you are convinced that like he's on a pretty steady decline now, then you don't have any leverage here. And then on the flip side, it's like, okay, Philly can look at that second piece and say, all the things I just said about Harden, they have the younger guy. He's locked into long term. He would fit really well with your team, blah, blah, blah. And they can go and they'll say, so we're just going to do like 1-for-1 or something like that. Right. Yeah. But then at the same time, Philly has no leverage because the guy doesn't even play for their team. So it's like,
right. Because, and that's like, well, we just gave up 1,000 picks to get this guy a year ago. We can't just give him away for nothing. Like
Simmons doesn't even play. Simmons doesn't even play and has said he's never playing again for them. So it's like they have no leverage either. Like they don't have to. They can't dictate any terms. Like everybody knows that the guy's not coming back to play for them. So it's like it's totally nuts.
Is this, by the way, the perfect reason why these are the only two teams that can make a trade with one another right now? Because if you take out one or the other and you go, well, and James Harden is a valuable piece. A lot of teams would want him. But like Ben Simmons, well, he's disgruntled. He hasn't been playing. He's a devalued asset. Any team you want to trade with, you heard about the Kings, right? Like, that's too high of a price tag. We're not giving all that up to get a guy who then you have to bring in and maybe convince that this is a good opportunity for you. James Harden, same thing. Well, you worked your way out of Houston. Now you're trying to work your way out of a bad situation, quote unquote, which is arguably the best situation in the NBA from a talent standpoint that you have around you. So that's why these two teams are the only ones that are going, hey, listen, we both got problems. Why don't we just trade them?
It's also because Philly, I mean, if I'm guessing here, if anything, this all started with Philly, like because they smell blood in the water. The Nets are struggling. They don't have Durant. Sure. Harden is not looking that good right now. They know they're not going to have Kyrie. Like, there's a little bit of like blood in the water aspect because if it's just rolling, if KD stays healthy, you don't even hear of it. This never comes up for sure. 100%.
Do you find so fast forward this though, then to the part where if the idea is that James Harden was expressing frustration because of what's gone on, he's had to do more heavy lifting. Do you find it, a little bit irritating that the idea is Kevin Durant had to come in and go, hey guy, like take a breath. I'll be back in a few weeks. Like that seems to be on the net side of it. What's gone on? Harden's frustrated, and then you put the Kyrie piece on top of it, and I can appreciate that. But the idea that you have to like remind Harden and convince him that this is the best opportunity to go and win a championship right now, that's the part where I'm just a little bit like, Harden, like look in the mirror, guy. Like I get it, it's been bad, but it's not like anybody was choosing by and large for the things that have happened. Like Kevin Durant wasn't like, gosh, Bruce Brown fell into my leg, just like I knew I was going to have happen now. Like that's I think is the most frustrating part from the net side of it for me, because this is one more thing. I think you said a couple episodes ago. Can you get 3 days in a row where the Brooklyn Nets aren't dealing with some new thing that makes it difficult to assume they can win a championship as constructed?
Well, the answer is no, because they've never gotten it. So you can't do it. When we come back in a second, in a little bit, I'm gonna just go through I'm gonna try to recap all the rumors that are happening right now, right? So just to give a little bit, which I'm sure will be outdated in 2 seconds, but but I'll try to go through all the examples of sort of like what's going on right now, what different people are saying to some degree, because there is kind of a lot. Like I think like we said before, I think there is fire with some of the smoke. It's a little hard to tell, how far down the rabbit hole we can get here and or how far these two teams are in this. But I think there are some key pieces we can take away from what's happened sort of so far. First, got to talk to you about TurboTax. People think that unusual circumstances can mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live, those experts, that's what makes things interesting. They love this stuff. You might not like the taxes, but TurboTax has got you covered on that. And we all have unique lives. Maybe you invested in crypto for the first time this year. Maybe you have an up-and-coming small business. You're raising a couple of rambunctious kids. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. That's what you like to hear. Help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter your unique situation. You can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or computer without leaving the house. TurboTax Live experts there to help however you need. You do your thing. They've got your taxes. Into it, TurboTax Live.
And don't forget, You've made us your first listen of the day. That's the Locked On Nets podcast covering the Brooklyn Nets. But you're going to want to make the second listen of the day, that NBA trade deadline coverage. It's happening the 10th of February, 3 p.m. And that means the Locked On NBA podcast is going to be covering it from 2 to 4 with Kim Becker, John Carolus, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd, getting all the breakdown and analysis from all of the local experts, including yours truly, along with Douglas Norrie. In case any of these deals go down, make sure to subscribe on YouTube to the Locked On NBA channel and turn on your notifications so you know when they go live. Real quick, before you get into the rumor and speculation piece of it, just from talking with Kai Carlin about the circumstances, the one other piece we're saying about the two sides and where they stand. When we were going back and forth about where is Philly in this process, thinking maybe they can strike while the iron is hot, and what's the perception of that team? Like, he was saying that, no, Philadelphia is not looked at from a guy intimately covering the team as someone who's going to win the championship, as good as Embiid has been this year. Now, adding James Harden would obviously change that dynamic, but the sense of urgency for them is maybe not as high as you might think it would be to add a piece. Maybe they're going to sit there and look at the buyout market or look to make some lower level moves. But I had said this previously, maybe it's ramping up because you don't have Ben Simmons, but you see what's happening in Brooklyn, and there's this kind of this window to surge and capture a title. But all indications from Kai were that, yeah, no, this is more just a holding pattern and a need to be patient and maybe get to the offseason and look at not just James Harden, but Dame Lillard and other high-profile guys that you could bring in to pair with Embiid.
Yeah, we already know they're patient because they just haven't dealt Simmons yet under
Yep.
some pretty under duress circumstances, considering the state of the team, right? So we already know they have this kind of patience thing in their bag simply by looking at how long Simmons has sat out, and they've stared at each other the whole season and not done anything, right? So, that one's pretty clear. Oh, real quick, we mentioned the Kai Carlin thing. We had technical difficulties with the recording of the Locked On Sixers, so that's why we had mentioned that yesterday that was going to happen. Some technical difficulties in that recording meant that it wasn't going to happen. So that's why we're doing this one. Okay, so where do we stand on this stuff? Okay, I'm not going to go through every piece of this source stuff because it's long and winding and it's a spider web like Charlie Day's in the office in the mailroom when it's Pepe Silva or whatever his name is. That's kind of what it looks like. But okay, so a couple of key pieces. Andrew Wojnarowski from ESPN wrote a pretty detailed article that released this morning, or excuse me, Monday morning, where he talked about, he sort of, for a lot of it, very definitively said, like, the Nets aren't doing, I'm going to sum it up, the Nets are not doing anything. Maybe there was one call put in between Morey and Marks, and, Marks was instantly like, no, we're not doing it. Okay, it's like, it seems so definitive. And then, until you get to the end of the article, he kind of talks about, like, maybe Philly does have enough leverage over the over the Nets to make this happen. You're like, I was pretty convinced this was nothing until we got to these last two paragraphs, and now it kind of does look like something. So that's that one. You get a couple of more prominent podcasts that come out that say that they've heard that they're already down talking to the pieces, and it's like down to Seth Curry or not, right? Like I said, what players are untouchable, and that reporting or like that would make it appear as if things were much further down the line. Then you get Nets Daily did a pretty good net income over at Nets Daily, had something from actually Keith Pompey that was talking about how the 76ers, one of their minority owners, Michael Rubin, is now being thought to maybe being brought up on like some tampering stuff because of how they've facilitated conversations between Harden, back channel conversations that we said before between the team to gauge interest, whether you'd resign, the stuff that you kind of need to know before you made the trade. It's like really important that Philly knows before they make this trade that he's going to sign either the extension or just like a long-term contract. Right. So like they have to kind of know that before going in. And then you have reporting that Harden, like he did in Houston, because James Harden does not have an agent. And it's funny because he's kind of like he does not need an agent because he's just like a max player, and like why pay someone to just get the contract that you can just do yourself, like with no
I'll take the
problem
most.
at all.
Thanks.
But he did, when he was trying to facilitate his way out of Houston, he did retain the services of an agency to help in that transition, or to help make the trade happen, right? To sort of broker the deal. Sometimes agents will broker deals as much as GMs because they're operating on behalf of their clients, and they can sort of speak a little more freely than like a GMs can at times, right? And like they can hammer out some of the details. So And the reporting was that Harden was seeking the services, had not hired anybody yet, but was seeking those kind of similar services to try to make something like that happen. All this is like happening at the same time, by the way. Like this is all on Monday. All of this stuff comes out, and all this stuff is so conflicting, which is like why I said, well, you can just wrap your mind in a pretzel around this stuff, because all of it is something, and it's like all nothing. It's all nothing.
It's an illusion. It's a magic trick.
Let me ask you this though. Don't you think everyone's just like almost like Harden hasn't come out and said anything publicly, nor he need not, like it doesn't matter. Like he doesn't have to come out and speak. But don't you get the sense that we're already so far down this? I almost just think it's going to be weird for him to come back. I'm not even saying trade. I'm not even saying we should trade him. I still am in team better with James Harden. Like, so this is not that. But man, like this is so crazy. How can he come back and just play for the team now after all this? Like, maybe I think guys just move on. And this is the nature of the NBA. And we talked about this specific thing yesterday about relationships around players. But doesn't it seem so crazy to like Friday morning, he's just back and he's like, let's go win that championship. He's like, man, that is not what the last couple of weeks have been about, my man. Like,
come on, boys. I know you saw me on the court looking like a borderline and one player, right?
Let me say one more thing, and then I want to get your question about that. One more thing. This was not a reported thing. I did talk to Jackson Gatlin, who is the Locked On Rockets guy, yesterday at length. Right. We talked for a while, and he covered the team through the Harden years and had very good access to the team. So he's he's definitely an insider. But anyway, he wasn't reporting anything, but he was just commenting how this feeling right now around Harden is like exactly what happened right before he left Houston. Like right down to like the way he played in the Kings game to like look, you know what I mean? Now maybe he's hurt. He's got the hamstring thing. I'll still put that in he's hurt category. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like that's how it's been reported. That's how I'll take it. But Gatlin was so interested because he was like, hey, I'll come on the podcast and just talk about the end of that. And how these two timelines are very, very similar with the things that were said, the things that were leaked, the play on the court, like the not owning some of the responsibilities. And that's not just him that said it. That's been reported too. It's like, it kind of is never his fault around stuff. So anyway, I just found that interesting. But anyway, like how, with all this in mind, like how did they walk this back into the bottle? It seems crazy.
Well, and I'll start with the second part first, because you can, at the time everyone said, well, yeah, but Houston, you went through these different iterations. You brought in, other players to pair him with. You tried the Russell Westbrook. You had the Chris Paul. And by the way, maybe we all should have been sitting there thinking, now there's one guy that's always there that things don't seem to necessarily work out. Had a good run with Chris Paul, but I think we all, at least, and NBA wise, just fans of the league, you go, yeah, of course you want out of Houston. It's all coming undone there. Of course you want to go play with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And I remember when we were doing the podcast, I said, I was like, sure. So you pack on some weight, really spread it on that you're not interested in being a part of this. You facilitate your way out of there because you're one of the best players in the league and you deserve to be competing for championships. And then when you get to Brooklyn, you'll dial it back up, get yourself into great shape, and it'll all be good. Now, there's these other little things that happen behind that, like getting the injury last season and the carryover effect from it. But to your point, when you hear the firsthand account of how things fell apart in Houston, you kind of have to remove all the other pieces and the big names in Brooklyn and say, okay, so I see a pattern here. And I never thought about James Harden in the same vein as being an interesting personality, a difficult personality. But if you can be doing this, if the rumors can be around that there's a possibility that you're this upset that you want to leave Brooklyn with Durant, with Kyrie and everything else, then you have to start to say, man, you're right up there with the most difficult personalities or egos around the NBA to deal with. So I want to tap back into whether or not you can rebottle the ketchup on this one. But first, real quick here, just remind you guys that BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before, as football is now marching towards what they call the big game. Less than a week away here. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football, friends. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, as well as NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live, real-time updates, and current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, no, I don't, you said you're in camp. It's better to have Harden than not. I agree with it on paper. But one, no, I don't think you can rebottle this, because the other little undercurrent here is that it does seem like Harden specifically has been frustrated with the mandate in New York City and how that ended up impacting Kyrie and Kyrie's decision making, and that he hasn't been there. And now he's there for away games, but not for home games. That seems to play in it as well. I don't see how it works out that you just come back and everything ends up looking great. Because whether or not these guys are good on the court, good players on the court, I'll go the extra mile. I know that they're incredibly talented and it just kind of works itself out, but chemistry matters. Like it matters having some sense of what everyone's identified role is. And I know when they've been on the court together, it's been next level incredible, but you didn't have this. That was last year when you had this beautiful, like, hey guys, we're surging towards it. Injuries, everything else. It doesn't work out. Now over this past year, there's been a lot of other things that have unfolded, including the idea that whether or not Kevin Durant said, yeah, I want him back, I think we can win a championship. That's about what's my best chance to win a championship this year. Right. I wonder how Kyrie feels. I wonder how the Nets feel about Kyrie. I wonder how everybody feels about anybody. And at a certain point, I don't know if I'm Sean Marks in the Nets that I go, maybe we just need to pull the trigger here. And by the way, if not Philadelphia, maybe we just need to open it up to everybody. And once you do that, then you have to do something. But I don't know. It just seems like this is the kind of thing where we're going to be talking in the offseason how it kind of, just fell apart over the remainder of the season. Things didn't work out. And what are the Nets going to do with Harden now? And maybe, I don't know, like, is it just worth it to rip off the Band-Aid now before the deadline instead of in the offseason after you haven't won a championship and you have all of these questions to answer?
See, you said, like, we're going to talk about the offseason. It's not that. We're going to talk about this the rest of the season. If he's on the team,
yes,
if he stays,
100%.
If he stays on the team past the deadline, this will be the underlying, like, thing that no one wants to talk about at the dinner table, but is just still happened. You know what I mean? Like
every missed game, every
missed game, yep. Everything. If they don't, because honestly, I'll tell you right now, if they don't win the championship this year, there's no chance he's coming back. Like, I'll say that right now. Like, if things even go a little off the rails, the Band-Aid doesn't get lifted. There's they can't get the injury thing sorted. And all this stuff, there's just no chance. There's no chance he's come back. And so you're going to play under this cloud the rest of the season of, if it doesn't work out, you have to just think he's gone. Like, I don't know how there's no way you can think anything else. Like, you'd be nuts if you thought it was going to be different. And right. So, and then you mentioned chemistry before, and I'm generally not a huge chemistry guy around that stuff, except that when you really want to get to the promised land, you have to have it. Like, yes. If you to win a championship, I would say it's marginal along regular season win. It definitely helps, right? But I think sometimes it's a little overblown, especially when you have insane talent. I think that if the talent wins and then chemistry is second, winning allows you to develop chemistry, right? More than anything else. But as you get dialed down all the way deep into the playoffs, where every little thing does matter, not having it is a problem. And it's so hard to just envision how they would have any after all this stuff. And in this case, it's not just Harden. It's all this time missed, all this other BS that's gone on with the team. I can't blame him for being a little frustrated here, for sure. This thing has been kind of a mess, yeah. Since it started, and a lot of stuff, no fault of anybody's, just bad luck. But I just don't know how. This is what I mean about waking up on Friday and just grabbing your lunch pail and going back to work. It's just going to be this thing that sits here for the rest of the season. Like you said, every missed game, every time he's injured, every time he doesn't play well. It's going to be, whether we talk about it every time, people will think this the rest of the season. There's just you can't unring the bell here.
And by the way, Kevin Durant's not coming back on Friday morning. He's not going to be here for a while. So you're still talking about the Nets go on, I think it's 8 of their next 11 games are going to be at home, where Kyrie Irving won't be available. So even if you get through this deadline and Harden says, all right, it's cool, I'm fine, man, I'm not going to do what everybody thinks I'm going to do and freak out. But if then he has 8 home games without Kyrie Irving, and it's a slog and they're losing games. And by the way, if a handful more losses start piling up here, the Nets are creeping towards the 500 line here. There's also that whole weight of it as well. And that's where I think what the Nets try to accomplish here. This is the other weird part that comes into play here. If you're going to keep James Harden, then all of a sudden, we've talked about before when fans always say, just go get Miles Turner. Go get this guy. Go 18 million. What's 20 million? Who cares about the tax? I actually suddenly think that whether you want to or not, you do have to say who gives a crap about the tax implications, because you may need to bring in a guy that's going to be more expensive and take every asset you have and who knows, whatever pieces it may require to get to a place where you can stem the tide until Kevin Durant is back, where you can pacify James Harden and satisfy him that, hey, we're going to be okay until Kevin Durant gets back. So there's also that layer to it as well. And that's, I think, some of the mental gymnastics that the Nets have to be doing here too, is how much are we going to spend here on top of what we've already spent to maintain this thing, to see if it can be successful when we get to the playoffs. And listen, you'll walk into the playoffs, you'll go into the playing game if you had to, and feel confident if you have all three of your superstars on the court that you're going to win, that you can take anybody on, and you can win every series and win a championship. But there's a long path from here to there. And I do just wonder if at some point the Nets as an organization have to be thinking, if we in our heart of hearts are uncertain about how the rest of the season is going to play out, then we have to consider what we can set ourselves up for in the offseason to re-surround Kevin Durant with other talent. And that means avoiding luxury tax implications. It means getting as many assets as you can back now that may not be as valuable later. You said this before about the playoffs. I'm saying it about this. I don't care what all the rumors. I know it's trending in the direction of him staying. It's not 0% chance that James Harden doesn't get traded here, right? It is not a zero-sum game yet until the trade deadline passes on Thursday.
If he's on the team Friday too, or whenever the next game is after that, it's like also too. I mean, I typically don't put tons of reactions into this, but like even the fan reaction is going to be weird, right? It's hard to like total. I know there's a ton of Harden stands out there, and I get it. Like there's people that just love like James Harden is their team. I get it. Like there's a huge. I mean, believe me, there's been a lot of people that have been very vocal about this.
Well, I've been in spaces where 2 days ago they were like, we don't need him. Bring in Ben Simmons. Let's go. Like there's a certain segment of the fan base that is already thinks that the Harden's gone in their eyes, right? Like they're already done with him.
It seemed point. Like over the weekend, it did seem a lot more like that. This is where it's like, but like, what's the Brooklyn Net fan reaction? It feels tough to embrace him after this, unless he comes after the trade deadline and says something like, hey, none of that was me. I want to be here. I'm re-signed. Actually, that'd be the other thing. There's one other thing that can happen here. The other thing that can happen that could turn it around was to make it through the trade deadline, and he like decides to re-sign the long-term contract, right. Which I believe he can still do on that timeline. That would be the one other thing that could change it. Short of those two things, and that's not going to happen. So short of those two things, like I just don't even know. I just think the fan reaction is going to be weird around this. Like, and Nets have a good fan base. They're like not like totally rabid like other cities. So I don't think it would get like real ugly along those lines, because I just don't think that's the type of fan. Like Nets have a good fan base, really good fan base, but they're not like that, right? Like they're not like, they're not like all that vocal when it comes to stuff in terms of like the insane booing and stuff like that in general. And so I don't think it would turn like
Nets fans have been through hard times. They get it. We appreciate they appreciate what they have here right now. And you try to temper. They're not going to start booing like the other teams with other players. I was about to throw shade in the wrong direction, so I'll keep that to myself.
Yeah, we don't need to drag another team down on the mire with us here. Yeah, so I think
you're right. And by the way, I don't know if the extension is the right thing for the Nets to do with Harden at this point either. Like, I don't know if a 4-year extension is what you want to sign up for a 33-year-old James Harden. Like the other two in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, we've said this consistently. They're different types of players. Even with everything that's gone on with Kyrie Irving, you can get through this year and come out the other side of it and be like, yeah, of course we want to extend Kyrie Irving and have him here with Kevin Durant. James Harden is different. I feel like when you look at those three players, and Kyrie Irving being the youngest of the three, but when you look at the three of them, James Harden is the one that I think you'd have the highest level of concern of how the game evolves over the back end of his career. We talk so much about this with Kevin Durant. His game is going to age very well as he gets into his later years. I don't know if that works for James Harden, and then all of a sudden you're saddled with an albatross contract that you don't know what to do with.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was fun.
A couple of just little housekeeping things just to keep your eye on. Probably won't have a resolution on this. This is a little bit about Kyrie and his availability. A couple like signs that are just going in this direction that we might have this changed is that New Jersey just lifted its mask mandate on public gatherings and schools. Okay, so that's masks, not vaccines, but it's a sign that like restrictions are beginning to loosen in this area. Delaware did the same. The New York City mask mandate is set to expire February 10th. I actually think that will be a really interesting day to see what happens with that, because I think if that goes back, like, and they go the same direction as New Jersey, I think you can actually start thinking about a world where the vaccine piece is actually the vaccine mandate piece is walked back also. Like, so just keep an eye on that. That's February 10th. Let's see if the city re-ups it. I believe that's only the mask. I don't think I don't think the vaccine has the same timeline.
But at least, like you said, if we want to call it just stepping in a positive direction in terms of, as people say, getting back to normal, this is that first step in that direction. And that, by the way,
oh no, I take it back real quick. That is the vaccination deadline too. So that's just a day to keep in mind.
That don't be surprised if behind closed doors that was something that was mentioned as well. Hey, I know it's been difficult, but we're getting indications. It seems like we're trending in the direction where Kyrie Irving could find himself back and available for home games before the season is over or whenever the case may be. And that is something else that you obviously bring to James Harden and say, we are going to get back to the place when it's the three of you on the court dominating. So these are good, man. These are just fun times. I don't like to be bored. That's my thing. So I like to thank just the Nets in general.
No boredom. All right, we're going to get out of here. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go leave some comments. Go follow Adam on Twitter at Adam Arbrecht. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Norrie. Do all that stuff. And like I said, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
What is this word? Spa. I feel like you're starting to say a word and you're not finishing it. Are you trying to say spaghetti? Are you taking me for a spaghetti day? Charlie. Always.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. Well, we'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.